And I just basically try to train the top 150 people in my current organization. And I did a virtual simulation, which in my opinion is the best way of training, especially in a short amount of time. And when we were going through the phase of the simulation that they needed to map the stakeholders across the matrix, 90% of the participants were mapping the stakeholder groups where they wanted them to be versus where they currently are. And that's a typical failure, because you say finance needs to adopt and they need to support, which that does not mean that they will adopt and they will support, right?
Yes, yeah. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Heath Gascoigne. I am the host of the Business Transformation Podcast. This is the show for business transformators who are part business strategists, part business designers, part collaborators, and part negotiators. Business transformators have moved past just business design and includes oversight of those implementation of the business design and business transformations, and includes stakeholder management, coordination, and negotiation. If you work in strategy development and implementation to ensure that the strategy is aligned to the business design and technology, then you're probably a business transformator. This is the show where we talk to industry experts and professionals to share their stories, strategies, and insights to help you start, turn around, and grow your business transformation. Welcome to the Business Transformation Podcast. And in this episode, we're talking to one of those experts. We are talking to Augusto Romero, who is for all intents and purposes, we will say an experienced change leader. He has worked in multiple industries, 7 to be exact, and ranging on different types of transformations and size of organizations from 20,000 to 350,000 with long roadmaps, some of those ranging up to 25 years, and which one of the longest ones he spent on was 7 years on an organization-wide transformation. We might get into a few of those details in a minute. Augusto, welcome to the show. We might have to edit that bit out.
Thanks a lot.
How you going? You good?
All good, yeah. Great to be part of this conversation. Love the topic. So looking forward to our conversation.
Great, thank you. Okay, just for complete disclosure to our audience that Augusto and I have never met before prior to this call, a few minutes before this. So full disclosure, we're in a heavy hidden agenda. Everything we say and do at this moment is what happens in reality. It just happens that we're both in the same country right now. Although Augusto has worked in 7 different industries and across the globe, global entities, also starting in Argentina. That's right, Augusto?
That's correct. I'm actually originally from Argentina, from Cordoba, where I started my career initially in construction, and then my first change management role was actually in automotive at Fiat and Chrysler, before moving to London in 2012 to do an MSc in banking and finance. And I started working in 5 different industries, 5 different companies, always trying to drive target future operating model implementations, making sure that there's a clear vision, strategy, strategic priorities, and metrics, and then really bridging the gap between the current and the future state through portfolio, program, and change management. That's, in a nutshell, what I've been doing the past 15 plus years. And something that I really like is change in a way, because for me, if you ask me what change means growth. You always learn, even from the bad change experiences, you always learn. And change is super contextual as well. Tell me, Heath, one change experience that is the same as a previous one.
Yes, I think it's a good point. We'll get into that shortly. That change is different for everyone. No 2 changes are the same. And that brings in, when people want to apply tools and techniques and frameworks, and they apply them in the cookie cutter straight off the shelf. And I get that guys calling me to, Heath, I've read your book. I'm applying it word for word, or trying to apply it word for word. And I said, well, first, thanks for reading the book. But it's a framework, which means you don't apply it word for word. You apply it appropriately and proportionally.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So you're going to say?
No, you need to turn theory into practice and adjust that to unique operating environments, to unique audiences, challenges. And there are many things in frameworks that I have best practices, but you cannot follow. Let's say if you're looking at that kind of timeline, and you go from initiate to design, launch, and kind of close, because you have a key artifact or tool that you need to do in the design phase. That doesn't mean exactly that you will be doing it at that exact point in time in different contexts. So you also need to see when a tool is needed, not when a tool should be done based on a Prince framework or a process or anything.
Okay, audience, and so Augusto, I'll do this occasionally, or probably a lot of the time. Is this pause and say, audience, if you missed that, in context of what Augusto just said, in context is, and to play that back in, Augusto is seasoned, over a decade and a half experience in transformation projects. And in saying here, for those either on my direct project right now, guys, you're listening, about taking a framework and applying it straight off the shelf is, don't be dictated. Even best practice doesn't mean applying it directly as it's written. It's understanding the context and where you're working, and apply it according to the context. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's not a copy and paste.
Yeah. Okay, and it's coming from a seasoned professional. So take note there, guys. Alrighty, so we're going to keep this so we can contain our conversation, and the audience can follow along. We'll keep the 3 points as we usually do. So, what are from your change leadership background? What are the fundamentals to make from your change leadership background that you look for the must-have for the program to be successful? What particular approach, or do you have a particular approach that you follow on your change projects to make them successful? And then, now knowing what you do and know, what would you do differently if you could do it again?
Perfect.
How does it sound?
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, shall we crack on the first one?
Yeah. Fundamentals.
I think fundamentals, we're looking at the end-to-end change ecosystem. There are, in my opinion, 3 key components or 3 key capabilities. The first one is having clear direction, and that is the role of the executive leadership team or the C-suite. What is their role? They need to define reality and give hope. How do they do that? You need a clear purpose, you need a clear vision, you need a strategy, strategic priorities, values underpinning the strategy, and metrics or scorecard. Without that direction, the rest falls apart. Once that you have that, which is not easy to get, because many times organizations spend a lot of time, they invest in consulting firms to come up with a powerful purpose, right?
Yeah.
They come with a set of, with a new strategy, a new vision, strategic priorities. And many times they forget that is maybe 20 to 30% of the equation.
Yeah.
Then is, how do you operationalize the strategy? That's a completely different question. And there are kind of 2 capabilities there that are essential. One is an enterprise portfolio capability, which it can be called an EPMO. Many times.
EPMO.
Yeah, an enterprise PMO or enterprise portfolio management office, which basically the role of the EPMO or the enterprise portfolio capability is to balance the plan with organizational and operational reality. What does that mean? Integrated planning, prioritization, sequencing change initiatives, and optimizing on an ongoing basis. So without having that direction and a capability that can balance demand with supply.
That's essentially is what it's managing, demand versus supply.
Balancing demand and supply. So you have demand from the business, from customers to deliver a lot, like yesterday, but you have limited resources. And many of these capabilities that you have internally, like SMEs in technology or in product, it takes time to recruit experts. And it might take 3 to 12, 18 months. So it's not something that you can do overnight. Therefore, you need prioritization. So the first part, kind of the direction, the focus is essential. Otherwise, when you're trying to deliver change, a positive change for every single part involved, and realize the outcomes that you're trying to achieve,
Yep.
If you're trying to push too much through the pipeline, people can only absorb certain amount of change at a certain point in time, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So even if you have an enterprise change capability that normally does program and change management, which you could have, even if you have that, if you think about an individual employee, spends more or less 70 to 80% of their time doing the BAU job or doing the normal work. And the other 20% of their time, maybe they spend 10% curiosity, innovation, depending on the culture of the company.
Yep.
And then maybe they had 10% of time to do what? To learn new things. But this is in a company, in an organization that there are clear parameters in terms of this is what we expect our employees to do. Maybe the more juniors to spend less time, the more juniors more time. But if you have a framework like that, then that gives you an idea of how much change can you push at a certain point in time based on the ability of people on the ground to absorb that new information, the new process.
So you've come from the very top. From the first point is having your C-suite comes up with their focus. You've broken it down into purpose, vision, strategy, strategic priorities, and then metrics to measure the progress of that. And how you implement that is that's one part, is the strategic, got the vision going, agreed. You know what good looks like with your metrics. And the second part being your enterprise PMO. And then that PMO is really balancing two things, or doing two things. They're balancing their portfolio and then prioritizing that portfolio. And then getting down to whether you have the capability or the capacity within the organization to handle change. And I think the takeaway there quickly for the audience is you can't do too much change at once, right? To do two things at once, I know of a client, maybe this one, is that they're trying to do two massive things at once. And it's like, you really want to try and do that to be successful? It's almost like change management 101, right? Is to do one change at once, one big change, and then do the next one. Don't try and bite off more than you can chew, because you know what happens there. You choke. So the two parts of the enterprise PMO is the balancing the plan and the prioritization. And how you know if you can got the capacity within the team is to look at. And I think you're saying there is a framework to have a look what they're doing for BAU work, what they're doing for innovation, and what they're doing for learning. And it's probably the combination of those two, innovation and learning, maybe that's the 20, 30%. That's your capacity. And if you don't have any capacity, now like 90, 95 in BAU, you got to ask yourself, are you setting yourself up for success or not?
Definitely not, because you're asking people to, organizations still do that. They try to push change, and many times the typical failure is thinking that by agreeing something. So going back to the concept of transformation is a process through which an organization makes major changes to improve profitability and drive sustainable growth. It can be changes to the business model. It can be changes to the workforce, customer experience, operations, or back office. The challenge that we have nowadays is the pace of change, right? If you think about target operating model, an operating model, to simplify, you have people, process, data, and tech, right? You have three key dimensions. If I had to assign a percentage to the success of the formula, I would say 70% people, bringing people along, 20% processes, and 10% the data, the tool, or the technology. And if you break this down into what we were just discussing, like the pace of change, the pace of transformation is a current challenge, because exponential disruption is becoming business as usual. If you look under the technology pillar, nowadays some statistics show that it takes 35 days for a new technology to reach a critical mass of 50 million users.
Whoa.
2 billion jobs is estimated that are going to be displaced by 2030 as a result of all of these advances in technology. So if you look at the technology, the pace of change there, and then if you add up on top of that the people aspect, right now you have 5 generations sharing the workplace for the first time, and robots are joining in as well. And 5 as well is the years. 5 years is the average shelf life of a business skill today. It was 30 years in 1984. So if you look at all of these and then you think, why do people say that change is hard, right? Well, you have this exponential change, the pace, plus many organizations don't set standards that are governed and reinforced in terms of saying, this is the amount of time that you should be doing BAU versus learning versus innovating. Then you have the perfect formula for change to not be successful. And as you might know, is like 70% of transformations fail. There are many reasons why they fail. But if you cannot manage that, if you cannot properly prioritize organizational change and build the right reinforcement systems and structures around to enable people to adopt the change, and it takes time, people don't learn something new overnight, then moving into change management is just basically applying a playbook with very limited resources, with an audience that has not the capacity to really follow what you're telling them. So it's just without without having a clear direction given by the C-suite and clear focus given by the EPMO or the portfolio office, the rest is just a bunch of best practices.
You said it. I think something you're alluding to there about capacity, and it's like if you don't allow the staff the time, and I've seen organizations that when I'll join and will rescue their program, and you find out that their key SMEs don't have time committed to the project itself. They're trying to do it on the side of their desk, and there's no formal budget for this transformation, and it's almost a silent, quiet project, but they're trying to change the organization, so they don't commit the resources to it. People try to do it on best endeavors, and the frustration is there. They want to do good. There's no, probably to the earlier point about change leadership, that's completely missing, but organizations continue to do this.
Absolutely. And there are cases where you have direction, you have focus, but then you still have competing priorities. So you might have the top 1 strategic priority for the organization competing for the same resource that the top 2 strategic priority for the organization needs at the same time. Then how do you unblock that? That is when another capability comes into place, which is an enterprise prioritization committee or process that can go and say, okay, how can we sequence this? Can we add more resources, or can we postpone a milestone so we can free up the resource? And that is when you start looking into, once that you have that in place, is a great step forward. But many times what organizations realize as well is maybe you have 22 strategic priorities and you're coming from not having strategic priorities, right? It's a huge step forward, but most likely there are still too many. So if you can further progress on that in organizations with 350,000 employees that I've been part of, they managed to get to 10 priorities at enterprise level with a clear owner per strategic initiative, with a clear program structure. And in smaller organizations with maybe 20,000 employees, it is possible to have like a top 3 priorities, which if you need an SME that is allocated to priority number 3, then automatically you know that the top priority is number 1. And if the number 1 priority needs the SME, by default in the way of working, it goes, that SME is assigned to priority number 1 and priority number 3 postpones. But getting to that point, a maturity level,
it's a big maturity. Okay, so stepping through some of these fundamentals is you've got your clear vision, for your C-suite comes up that vision. We talked about the purpose, vision, strategy, priorities, and the metrics. And then the second part there is the EPMO, the Enterprise Project Management Office, and their role is two parts: the balancing and the prioritization. But then you said that the challenge, or one of the challenges you mentioned, is the competing priorities, and so the challenge is trying to marry those ones off. And so, how would you do that? A framework of the pecking order of what's more important? Is it tools down? Is it, if it doesn't have this impact or certain impact to revenue, or we mitigate a certain risk, a reputation risk maybe, that takes priority, or cost saving, or protect our assets first. With revenue protection, asset protection, or revenue growth, asset protection, and human or people, process, life saving as our top three priorities. And any strategic objective from there marries up against those. That's how they get the rating. And then resources are allocated based on that rating.
Absolutely. Many times it really depends on what is the maturity of your enterprise portfolio capability. If you're talking about, normally, if you follow the maturity cycle, you start having a PMO, which is a project management office. You evolve that to a program management office. Then that evolves into an enterprise program management office. Then that moves into an enterprise portfolio management office. And a more mature portfolio management office will not only look at balancing that demand with supply, but also we look after the governance for prioritization. So all the things that you were just describing are basically captured as part of the demand management process. So you have a demand intake form that you agree with leadership. What are the key information that we need for decision making? It might be, what is the issue that we're trying to solve? What are the consequences of not solving this at the planned timeline? Consequences in terms of ROI, cost, resourcing, postponing other, you look at dependencies across other priorities. So that's more like a very mature portfolio management office at the enterprise level that manages that on a regular basis. In an agile world, in an agile portfolio management office, that will be like the quarterly review cycles or the business review cycles that you look at all of these. So that will be kind of the solution, and then it's really making choices. I mean, strategy equals choices, right?
Yes, I've got some good quotes there, Augusto. Strategy equals choices, and there's a couple you said just previously, which the disruptions are becoming or are be business as usual.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, change is constant, and the thing with this is the fact that change is constant. Change is no longer linear with a clear end state. It isn't an intermittent project or initiative. It's constant, and that means that there is fatigue from constant change. That what that requires is reevaluating and changing our mindset. Having a transformative mindset with a set of values, principles, and behaviors that need to be fit for purpose to enable you to survive in this environment, right? For example, trying to create the perfect capabilities. That's not really part of a transformative mindset, working toward a set of static capabilities. Instead, a transformative mindset will build capabilities that can easily flex and adapt, recognizing that the purpose of transformation is actually to become transformative. So if you're trying to create a perfect thing, going back to our initial conversation, the context is changing at an exponential speed.
Yes.
At the time that you spend maybe 6 months debating with the executive leadership team the perfect solution, the context has changed.
Yes. Oh, yes. You said it perfectly. So many, I've seen approaches and coming to clients and have set their framework up in place. And in some cases it's agile. They call it agile. Maybe it's agile by name only, or they're gated. And it's clear, locked and loaded process, no allowing for any change or any impact from the external environment. They know the world's in a state of continuous change, but their process doesn't allow for it. They get to their gate or their milestone, and then the reality of what they wanted to implement does no longer solve a problem that exists because the problem's moved now.
Exactly. And many times we are coming up with solutions without really thinking through what is the issue that we're trying to solve.
Yes.
And that's many times part as well of the issue. You have a lot of solutions competing for the same resourcing, but you haven't really, do you have a compelling case for change? Going back to your second question, and connecting as well with some typical failures and connecting as well with a transformative mindset, what are the behaviors that you will expect from a transformative mindset or a change mindset? Normally, once that you have nailed down the case for change, which is basically answering some basic but fundamental questions, like, why do we need to change now, right?
Yeah.
What is the burning platform? Basically, why can't we go back?
Yeah.
What will we do? What needs to change and how? We will do this first, then that, year 1, year 2, horizon 0, horizon 1, horizon 2. And more importantly, what do we want to become? What is a compelling, transformative vision of the future?
Yes.
And last but not least, what is the price if we change successfully, right? So if you can slow down, once that you got the mandate at the leadership level, this is a priority. Here are the resourcing. These are your targets. Then is to get people along. And going back to my point, that is bringing people along the journey is 70% of the success formula. You need to have a compelling story. I mean, storytelling is so powerful. You might know that people make their decisions with the emotional part of the brain, and then they rationalize with the logical part of the brain. So you need to have a compelling vision of the future. You need to answer what is in it for them. What happens if we don't do this? This is how you're going to benefit. This is the price. And that normally takes a lot of time with leadership and with all the people that you need involved and to get the buy-in to execute. It might take you 3 months, depending on the size of the change initiative. It might take you 3, 6 months that you will go iterate, talk to a ton of stakeholders, do discovery interviews, really nail down what is the burning platform. What happens if we don't change? And you need to test their appetite. And it might be like a really good solution, but it's the wrong timing. So the case for change and co-creating that part, that's it's only the first step, but it's so important.
If you're a business owner, leader, or manager looking to transform your organization and about to spend 6, 7, or 8 figures on your project, then listen to this all the way through. So my name is Heath Gascoigne, and I'm the author of the Business Transformation Playbook. I've used the 6-step agile framework HOBA, House of Business Architecture, with private clients including the UK government, 5100 companies and startups. I'm the guy that clients call to turn around their failing transformations. Join me, I'm running a 30-minute masterclass where I show you exactly what you need to do to transform your organisation on budget and on time. Click the link below this video to register. Look forward to seeing you there.
Okay, you said an interesting part there. It was all interesting. I'll play it back to you in a second, where people might agree to the solution, but it's the wrong time. I've been in some board meetings, and I say the board will say, yes, we think that option is the best option, but not for our team. It's like, well, actually, we're talking about your team, and it's like, and the reason part you talked that and you said it, the journey. What happened in that case is that the consultants that were there started at design, whether that was their remit. They said, let's come up with the future target operating model without even understanding what the current model looked like. And said, we want a future state, and this is what it looked like, without understanding the problems and issues today, and almost independent of the business. So there's no voice of the customer, no input. And so the representatives for that business in the boardroom were going, yeah, it looks really impressive. I think it's the best option you presented, but I don't agree with it for my team, which was actually for their team. And so the reason why they didn't agree, because no one spoke to them. They didn't take them on the journey.
100%. I mean, if you look at like, to make it very simple, you have like three kind of, you have current state, future state, and a gap, right?
Yes.
And when you go there as a consultant or as a change expert, transformation expert, in my opinion, the first by default step is do a thorough current state assessment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Identify who are the key stakeholders, nail down clear questions that you will ask them all to answer, and have the interviews. Finalize the discovery, and that will tell you your current state, what is the appetite, what is the burning platform, and that will give you the words that you can use for then selling them. Then you can sell back the solution to them using their words.
Their words, yes.
Resonate with them more. So nail down the current state discovery, and then move to the next phase, which is the vision of success. Try to visualize future back. You know, we are 3 years down the road, or we are 5 years down the road.
So the key takeaway there, audience, you missed it. And I'm a big fan of that. What you said is their words. And that's, I think that's the crucial part. And storytelling, you said before, as in storytelling is so powerful. I think it's almost for technical guys coming into programs who want to say, we got a technical solution. So, well, the part that's really going to get it for them is not the technical solution. It's a story about the technical solution.
Exactly. And many times you face the issue that you're working, most of the time nowadays, the transformations and changes are really related to data and tech.
Yep.
And you're working with deep experts on different technologies, and then translating that to the business, to the salespeople, that then they need a 30 seconds elevator pitch that they can explain to clients. That's a very, very hard job to translate all of that complexity, the logical models, the physical model, data model, the flows into a compelling elevator pitch, one-pager presentation, 30 seconds talking points.
Yeah,
that's not an easy one by ski.
Yeah, that's not. And I think that's really one. It's not easy, but I think that's where if you get that right, that's like the golden, not the golden goose, but the secret sauce. If you can be able to translate that, and that's what I talk about with clients and students is it's like giving a presentation, right? To understand your audience. When you understand your audience, understand their language, and you said those words, you use their words. You use their words, not so much against them, but it's their language. And if it's their words and their language, and if you're lucky enough and happen to go through that discovery phase, as you said, and it's their work, you're halfway there.
Yeah, and if you can try to make sure that one pager elevator pitch that you answer in a very brief sentence, maybe 6 to 8 words, the why are we doing this, what are we trying to achieve, and how are we going to achieve this? If you can put that on one pager that can be used as an elevator pitch, and you co-create that with all the people that then need to adopt and sell it, it might take you 5 months. But otherwise, you might be moving too fast, just in your head, with alignment with 2 or 3 people. But if you really want to drive a change, 20,000 people, 100,000 of people, you need to spend time in co-creation and speaking a language that resonates with them, speaking a language that resonates with your audience.
Yeah, so the audience, in case you missed that, it takes some time. And you see there, I've seen the business model simplified down to those key points. Your why, what, and how. Why are you doing it? What are you doing, and how are you doing it? And so, and it does take time. I remember I did I won't mention any names. It was a massive transformation, a government transformation that had been. I think the time they finished it, it was over £1 billion was spent on it. It was 8 years in the making. When I joined, it was in the second reincarnation, and it took 3 months just to get the vision statement agreed. And just not even the strategies, objectives, or measures, but 3 months just on the one statement. And part of that was the end of 2.5 years after the first version had started and finished. And so for that full 2.5 years, they never had a vision. And I said to what we talked about earlier, get the focus, vision. Took 3 months. And I tell you, once we got the 3 months, we got the vision done. It was like, all right, now we've got a place to go. And everyone's like, it's like, you know what? It took a while, but now we've got a bit of momentum.
Absolutely. And I mean, even if you want to look at a smaller scale, right? If you're talking about smaller change, you might be looking at a 3-week sprint to do the discovery of the current state, 2 or 4 week sprint to do the vision of success, the point of arrival or future state, and maybe 3 to 4 week sprint to bridge the gap and come up with the approach or the proposal to go from current state to future state, kind of a roadmap, key dependencies, resourcing, etc., key milestones, critical path, so on and so forth. It's just depending on the scale. Is the amount of time that you need to estimate, and also it depends on the ability of the organization to drive change successfully.
But it covers the essential parts that you talked about. So the vision, what you said earlier, we've got the current state, discovery, the future state, and then the gap, understanding how to get there, roadmap, milestones, measures of success, resourcing. Bear in mind that you said earlier, it takes time to find experts, not just find experts, but recruit the experts. So the takeaway for that point there, audience, is these change and transformation projects can't be done on the fag packet, on the side of the desk. They require time and effort. And you've quoted the same thing, that the research, 70% of transformations end in failure, and you wonder why. Because you're trying to do these shortcuts. Unfortunately, these things do take time, as you're saying there. So it takes your time. You need to commit resources to it. There is an approach. So I think we covered off on the approach, right? On the fundamentals. Now we're into the approach. Yeah, you need to commit the resources to it, and regardless of the size of your transformation, it's got those fundamental parts.
Going more into the approach. I mean, if I need to oversimplify a change playbook, I would recommend, once that you have nailed down the why, the case, the purpose, vision, and case for change, then I would say there are 4 generic steps that are, in my opinion, must-haves. The first one is a change impacts assessment, which has 2 main parts. One is, what are the stakeholder groups or the business units impacted by the change? Either high, medium, or low level of impact. And what does that mean? If, for example, finance has a high level of impact, that means that you need finance to support a lot at a high level of effort for finance to either build the solution or adopt the changes. So you first look at who are the business units or the stakeholder groups impacted, and all organizations have different setups, right? The typical ones might be procurement, legal, finance, HR, technology, product. So you just map them all out and you assess, do I need their help to build or adopt the changes? Yes or no? The answer is yes. Do I need a lot of their help, like high, medium, low? That's one part of it. And that will then inform your stakeholder map. And the second part of the change impact analysis is, what is the level of change impacts on our operating model key dimensions? So people, process, and tech. And that, for example, if you have high on people, medium on process, medium on tech, that tells you that you need a high level of change management support. So you need to build your program management office. There are many frameworks to tell you how many people you need in that transformation office or PMO based on the scale of the project. But without these steps, what you don't have without doing them is an understanding on who do I need help from, and 2, what is the level of change management support required. So once that you have that, which in change management is called change impacts analysis, once that you have that, then you can move to the second kind of fundamental, in my opinion, which is stakeholder management, mapping the
stakeholder management.
And stakeholder management, many times it is confused between stakeholder management and communications. So
Yes.
communications are the ones that go the one-to-many, for example, a town hall or
Yeah.
a webcast or webinar. Whereas stakeholder management are the one-to-few, let's say Heath to 5 members of the finance team, or the one-to-ones, the one-to-one interactions like you and I are having right now.
Yep.
That is stakeholder management, and that is critical because the people that they have high level of influence, the influencers, influence and the influence and the influencers. The influencers are the ones that are fundamental for the success of what you're driving. So
yes.
those influencers that also have imagine that you have a stakeholder that is an influencer, high level of influence, and low level of support. What that support means? It's a matrix. On one side of the matrix, you have level of influence. On the other side of the matrix, you have level of support, and you just need to map the different stakeholder groups across the matrix. And support connects to, are the priorities of the change initiative that you are driving aligned to the priorities of the stakeholder group? If the answer is no, then it might be high influence, meaning I need this stakeholder, I really need to build or adopt the solution, but our priorities are not aligned. So it's low level
priorities. Okay.
And that is then when it comes, the lower the level of support, the more you need to have one-to-one or one-to-few interactions to really try to get their buy-in and shift them from low level of support to high level of support, and turn them into champions, and keep them satisfied on an ongoing basis. So that's kind of just to wrap up before going into the final 2 steps. Understanding who are the stakeholder groups impacted.
Stakeholder groups,
that, assessing what is the level of influence and support, and based on that, targeting your communication approach to their communication styles.
Okay. So we play that back to you. So as part of the initial change impact assessment, is that understanding your stakeholders groups who are impacted, and that was for 2 reasons. You were looking for how they're impacted, because you're going to need them for building the change or for adopting the change, and then you're going to need to recruit them to support, whether that, depending on their role, whether they're going to help support by building the change or not, and then the level of change on the key elements of the people, process, and technology. And then based on those two criteria, you're going to understand the scale of change and what sort of PMO support they need. And if it's low level of change, they'll need less PMO support, and it's a high degree of change and they'll need some more. And that really comes back to the organization then, right? Then do they have, and you talked about the maturity before, about the level of the PMO office. So you went from a PMO to from a project management, program management, enterprise program management office. So you went from the low to the fully mature, and also would be in terms of the scale of your change, the bigger the scale of change, possibly the more support you need, then the more mature you need your ePMO. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. And now, so with the stakeholder management, I think it's a good point there, because people also confuse, they'll hear or misuse the multiple use of business transformation versus digital transformation, or business analysis and business change. And so we're talking here about stakeholder management versus communication. And I see that a lot. Said, oh, we've got stakeholder management, and it's a comms team, and all they're doing is sending messages, and they're taking summaries out of meetings and say, okay, we need to write this email and send it, or write this note, or we'll hold a town hall. So that's not change, or that's not stakeholder management. It's just sending messages. There's the communication, as you're just saying, coming out of stakeholder management, is understanding we've got the influence and support matrix, understanding where they fit in that model. Our outcome is that we want to identify influencers or champions. And I think you're saying there, the strategy part of it is understanding where they fit on the matrix and where needed, using strategies to get the different parts of those matrices.
Correct. And I just basically try to train the top 150 people in my current organization. And I did a a virtual simulation, which in my opinion is the best way of training, especially in a short amount of time. And when we were going through the phase of the simulation that they needed to map the stakeholders across the matrix, 90% of the participants were mapping the stakeholder groups where they wanted them to be versus where they currently are. And that's a typical failure, because you say finance needs to adopt and they need to support, which that does not mean that they will adopt and they will support, right?
Yes, yeah.
And
that's a good point there, that people will make an assessment and say, well, this is where we want them to be versus reality of where they currently are. Yeah, so the takeaway there, audience, is to understand when you're doing that assessment, it's not the to-be state, it's the as-is state. And it goes back to probably the fundamentals you're talking earlier. There's the current state, future state, and the gap. And so just understand which ones you're looking at.
Absolutely. And then he says, going back to your point of one email sent to the whole audience, is the whole point of stakeholder management, the one-to-few interactions, the one-to-one interactions, is targeting the narrative to that specific audience.
Yes.
And you need to adjust the message. You need to really understand the audience. So having a compelling case for change that then you can sell to stakeholders, first identify them by doing a change impact analysis, then targeting your narrative to different stakeholder groups, clearly understanding the current level of influence and the current level of support. Once that you have that, then there's another point that many times is overlooked, which is your business readiness. Many times when you ask executives or change leaders, what is your level of readiness to go live? There's not a scientific answer, or it's never going to be scientific. It's more like an art than a science, but you can create a business readiness list with all the requirements that they need to be ready by the time that you go live. You can assign a priority level, like must have, good to have, etc. And then you can determine, make a conscious choice, strategy choice. Do I want, is my strategy to go live with a 70% level of readiness? Because I think that these requirements can be finalized. Let's say we start creating a benefits realization approach, right? What are our KPIs, outcomes? How do we track success? Many times you go live and that is work in progress, and you finalize that after. If you have enough resourcing, you might be able to do that before. But there's a lot of requirements in that business readiness list that then when you add them up, it will tell you, Heath, are you willing to go live with a 80% level of readiness? And most of the time, the question from Heath will be, what will it take to be 100% ready, right?
Yes,
so you can have a different conversation on what does readiness means, what are the readiness criteria, who is responsible for being ready across the different dimensions. And that is business readiness. Change readiness is a bit more specific. It's just one component of business readiness, looking more at having a change champions network, having a newsletter, a SharePoint site, targeting the narrative, some kind of fundamentals of change management. So understanding the impact across stakeholder groups and the operating model, targeting your message to your key stakeholders to make sure that they are championing and supporting. Having a level of readiness that is acceptable for you and you understand and you're happy with it. And once you have that, you go live. And many times a typical failure is going live and thinking you are done, right?
Yes.
Is the whole post-go live support. So
post-go live support,
which is many times overlooked as well. And for example, if you go live and you do a survey, nowadays it's so easy to do a survey, and you see how people are thinking about the changes, then you come with different options, how to support after the change. Do you want to do a Q&A session? Do you want to do a town hall? Do you want to provide incentives to people championing the changes so others will follow? Or do you want to build personas or empathy maps, which is basically identifying people that are influencers that can be the voice of people impacted by the change, and they can tell you how people on the ground that need to adopt the change are really feeling, what they're thinking, what they are saying, and then you can really, really target your narrative and your message and shift from resistance to support. And just to wrap it all up, if you had to choose a couple of or 3 KPIs to measure the success of all of these 5 steps, you will have change effectiveness, which is really the processes, how you're managing the change journey. Adoption, are people actually doing, working in the new way? And sentiment. Sentiment you can check all the time. You can do temperature checks all the time and see not just how the program team driving change feels, but also how the audience is feeling. So if you have a high level of adoption, high level of change effectiveness, and high level of sentiment, I think you have a high likelihood of realizing the outcomes while keeping an engaged workforce. And just to close on that is higher employee engagement leads to higher productivity, higher profitability, higher customer satisfaction. And that all in all is a perfect formula, right?
There is a direct correlation, I think, in the summary. Employee satisfaction results in customer satisfaction.
100% engaged workforce means a productive workforce, means higher productivity, profitability, and customer satisfaction, and as well as shareholders value. Right?
Yes. Okay. So we need to try and wrap that up in a sentence or two. Okay. So I was writing notes as we're going along there. So we had from our change impact assessment, we covered that earlier, then the stakeholder management. Then we went with the stakeholder management was the targeting communications, because we had a better understanding of our comms, our targeted narratives. So it wasn't fuzzy noise to our stakeholders. So they can, and really, that's also the building up of the engagement, right? And if depending where they were on the support influence matrix, we can have some influence in moving them to be champions. And I think I like the key part there, in case the audience missed it. You said that you look for what will sound like a superset of the employee pool as your champions, 150 or whatever the number is, and they will be the key players that you would focus on to go out and, you know, if they're maybe the key roles in the organization, that they are the face of the program, the face of the change, the change champions. So how they're using them as the influence, and then the business readiness is we want to understand the level of the ability to go live. And you said that, and so I'll quote you on this one, that's the art and the science. I think so too. There's maybe it's like tools and techniques. You wouldn't try and couldn't apply a technique straight out of the book. It's understanding the context, as you said earlier. There is what are we looking for there? We're looking for with that business readiness. What does readiness mean to the organization? What is needed, and therefore what is also missing? And that you asked the question there of what would you be comfortable with, and then if you are comfortable with that, what will take us to go from 80% ready to 100? So asking those questions, and then a key part which I see missing, and I'm glad you're saying it, good to hear it, is the benefits realization approach. Is that, you know, I see with programs, big programs, transformation programs, someone called a benefits manager who's never been seen or heard for before turns up on the last day when the project's about to go live and say, okay, which one of these benefits are you trying to realize here? Well, actually, we needed you at the start of the program, not at the end of the program.
Yeah, and that actually is one of the typical failure points, focusing on activities over outcomes. So really failing to deliver the right outcome because of a process or a timeline. Many times the focus is, we need to meet the milestone, we need to meet the timeline, we need to follow the process. But what is the outcome that you're trying to achieve?
Focus on the outcome and not the process. Okay, I'm going to quote you on that. We've got a handful of quotes there, Beauty. Okay, on the process. And then we got into the post-go live support, which I think that's almost... It's depending if these steps have not been followed up to this point and you've just gone live. I've seen it with the businesses going, I can't wait for those guys to disappear because this has been such a painful experience. No one wants to go to no lessons learned. No one, any email coming from the PMO project office, they go, let's done with these guys. Let's go back to how things were before. But if it's done right and you get to the post-implementation support, the Q&A sessions, town halls, and the empathy maps, understanding how they, and I like that, think and feel, understanding these big change and transformation programs, depending on who you're talking to, they'll think that technology is the answer. We had a technologist on here earlier, and he said, no, as a technologist, technology is not the answer. And people, you want to change the people, and this is like empathy, think and feel.
100%. And I think there's a recent study done by Oxford, I think was saying something like transformation initiatives that consider workforce emotions are 2.6 times more likely to be successful, which is huge.
Wow.
2.6, I think, is really going back to the point of people 70%, process 20. And is if you are constantly doing a temperature check, which for practitioners is fairly easy to do. It's just organizing one-to-one with people, talk with people around, sending with MS Forms or Mentimeter. You can send quick surveys or at the end of a call. So there are many ways of really sensing where people are at, and just maybe as a kind of one of my techniques normally, especially when running workshops, is always when you're kicking off a transformation, like the one, for example, that you're driving right now. You have a ton of workshops, right? And there are kind of three things that are essential, at least with the program team, that you can measure on an ongoing basis. Let's say each time that you meet is how do you feel about our priorities? Basically, are our priorities clear? We have a clear in and out scope. So how do you feel about our priorities? How do you feel about our pace? Are we going too fast? Are we going too slow? Just fine. And how do you feel about our partnership? So priorities, pace, and partnership. If you can nail that down, if you can achieve those three in any transformation, at least with the program team, and they say, we're all clear on the priorities, we're all on the right pace, and our partnership is really strong. They're working across silos, they're collaborating, you feel like one team, then you got momentum. Otherwise, you need to adjust.
Okay. Those are some good three takeaways there. I think that's, so the three P's, the priorities, pace, and partnerships. Okay. So guys, remember that. Now, if you were, third question there, if you could do it all again, knowing what you know, starting on day one, if you have this arsenal of a decade and a half, multinational, multi-year transformations from let's say small, but they're still massive, 20,000 staff to 350,000 staff, what would you do differently?
Starting all again, basically back to my first change management role, back in Fiat and Chrysler's in Argentina.
Armed with what you'd had, what would you'd come in there and you do it how? Exactly as you did it here. You got all the lessons learned. Your number one priority would be the same thing. Pick off the vision, focus, strategy, strategic priorities.
It's really, really, really listen to the audience. Never forget about listening to the audience. They have happened to me recently as well, when in one of those one-to-few interaction with key stakeholders, key decision makers, they said something that then when I did the presentation to everyone, to the whole C-suite, to the global leadership team, the same stakeholder said exactly the same. And I was not visualizing that situation, so it kind of caught me off guard. But if you are doing those one-to-one, one-to-few, don't do it just to check the box. Make sure that you're listening to that, you're going back, and before you present the solution, make sure that you have addressed your key stakeholders' concern. So what I would do differently, I will go back over and over to that stakeholder until I was sure that stakeholder moved from low support to high support.
Okay. So you listen, and then maybe you get to maybe like in newbies to organizations or out straight out of university, your level of experience, people would start off as a novice or amateur, and they journeyman to expert to a guru. And usually the guys straight out of high school or university apply the framework straight from the book, not having any situational awareness to understand where they can apply it. But now being after these many more years, is that the lesson there is to more be adaptive. You even said your word yourself, the transformative. There's transformative, the term you use.
Transformative mindset, yes.
Transformative mindset, yes. So you might have been focused on just going to get this presentation done, but then your learning was to maybe catch yourself, the self-awareness, and then come back, okay, let me see. Okay, so the address concerns of your key stakeholders, update your knowledge now based on your feedback, and then go again.
Yeah, and that's another key point that you just said, is because many times you're doing a presentation, right? And you're super focused on covering the talking points, finishing the presentation. And many times you forget about what is your objective with the audience, right? So basically, before even finalizing the deck, is what does success looks like? Yes. If you are your audience, what do you want them to feel? What do they want them to think? And what do you want them to do once that they have once that the presentation is over? So the communication objectives can be three, in my experience: either inform, which in a way is boring, or engage, which is positive, and the hardest one to achieve is inspire. So share great stories that inspire action. So if you achieve that one, congratulations. It's really, really hard, because it's kind of you are a top-notch storyteller, but try to go for engage, at least, ideally inspire. But inform, really think, would you like to be in a presentation that is to inform? Probably.
Okay, so that was, I think, a great takeaway there, is about presenting to the audience who missed that. Now, coming from a seasonal, we can't discount the size of the transformations you've worked on. I've worked on some big ones, but not 350,000 staff. And I was like, I would even say to that organization, you think you can do that? So well done. So this is where the context of where that's coming from. If you do it when you're doing a presentation, think about your audience when they're walking away, is that they've got three takeaways, and maybe the order of hierarchy of needs. Do you want to inform? Do you want to engage? Or the best part is that you want to inspire. And that is, how do you inspire? By sharing stories that inspire action.
Great stories. Sharing great stories that inspire action.
Great stories.
I think is the ultimate goal for any communicator.
Awesome. Okay. Awesome. Augusto, we'll wrap it up there. But my God, that was beautiful. Thank you very much. As takeaways, we've got a decade and a half here of insight that we've got wrapped in probably about 45, 50 minutes, maybe. So well done. Thank you very much, Augusto. I'll put your contact details on the show notes if people want to get a hold of you. You've dropped a ton of quotes there. Actually, if I'll have a look for that Oxford survey. Sounds great to see, the 2.6 times more successful if you focus on people's feelings, or emotions rather, if you cater for those emotions. That will be, I'll find that if you've got it, share that with me and I'll put it in the link.
Yeah, it's a survey from University of Oxford and EY that is called "The Future of Transformation is Human."
The future of transformation is human. What a suitable title. Alrighty. Okay, I will put that as well as your contact details, how to get a hold of you if they want some change leadership. They know the man to go to. Super.
Glad to contribute to the community, to the change community, and a pleasure to be part of this podcast, Heath. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my friend. Look out for this will come out in a couple of weeks or a week, maybe sooner. I'll tag you on LinkedIn and you can share it around to your network and do what you like.
Excellent. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thanks very much, my buddy. Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
Okay,
Bye.
see you. Bye.